Rabbi Green.
Ruling.
Okay, let's go through our sponsors for today, and then we'll do the daf. Year of Learning. By Sue and Aaron E. Garlick, in memory of Malka Perlman and Philip Man, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Henya Rivka Perl Rosner, Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, and the family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Shall share her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Arav Akiva. Marsha Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Arav Shimon. Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Elbas Yaakov. Leslie and Gail Kaplan, excuse me, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gidler, Avrameir ben Shimon, and Martha Gidler, China Bas Yeshaya. Friends of Toby Paris, Saratova Bad Yisrael Dome. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka Bad Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. We have a month of learning by Carol and Josh Sanborn in memory of her mother, Ita Bat Nachman ben Yamin, Mel and Haran Haller in memory of his brother, Yaakov ben Avraham, Jill and Perry Meltzer, in memory of his father, David ben Fishel Halevi, and her mother, Bela Bas Avraham, Dov Bunlander in memory of his wife, Udal Bas Yehuda Tzvi. Also a month of learning by Stephanie and Fred Mortman in memory of her daughter, Mozal Bat Sarah Malka. Today being the 22nd, we have no days of learning otherwise, so we'll complete with saying, Neshamas have an aliyah, crank or a fear about the Yeshua Shama Taliyah, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael a good gaben.
Right.
I want to just point out as we continue with today's Gemara that remember we were dealing with the fact that certain number of threads braided or entwined were required for different garments associated with the Kohen Gadol and with the Kohen. Okay, and basically the Gemara tends to continue that discussion. Okay, trying to say, well, how do we learn that this is the requirement for this garment versus another garment? Do we learn it from another example or not? Okay, so as we go through the Gemara, okay, we'll point out a couple of aspects of that as well. Okay. Right, so we're on 72A, right? And just want to start. The Gemara pointed out that use of an analogy, trying to prove here on the top of the Amud, okay, that learning it from the blue, the sky blue, from the parochet, and that contains 6 strands. Okay. Now, Gemara is going to pick up, and as we deal with it, we'll see it's going to look at other examples. V'nelaf mishulav v'rimonav, says the Gemara. Maybe we should learn it set from the hem and the pomegranates that were hung on the hem of the Kohen Gadol's garment. Malahalan shmona, the same way these were 8 strands. Afkan shmona, so perhaps instead of saying that previously it should have been 6, maybe it should be 8. Why? We'll see in a moment. Danin kli mi kli, ve'ein danin kli mi tachshit kli. The Gemara rejects that suggestion by saying it's one thing to determine the number of strands from one garment to another garment, but we don't determine the number of strands from one garment to the, let's call it decorations or utensils or things like that on a garment. And the pomegranates were basically that. They were more like a decoration. Okay? They hung down from the robe of the Kohen Gadol. And so the Mishnah doesn't help us. The Gemara, however, says if that's the case, let's try an alternative. Ad Rabba, danin gufo mi gufo. Maybe instead we should derive from one object to another. Ve'ein danin gufo me alma. And we do not derive the strands for a particular object from in general, right? From all other places. Hainu da'amrinim, this is why we say, the sha'ar bigadim shelo ne'amar bahen sheish. Okay? In other words, we had the example that we could take where it was clearly stated 6 strands in one garment to apply it to those other similar garments where it did not include a number of the strands. Okay? So that seems to satisfy for the moment the Gemara. Hainu da'amrinim. Right? This is why we say l'sha'ar bigadim shelo ne'amar bahen sheish. That's why we said those other garments where the linen was not specifically cited. However, the Braita now tells us the following. Parochet esrim va'arba'a, that the curtain, right, was made from 24 strands. Okay? That these were 6-fold threads, and they were, right, wound around, right? Arba'a de shita, shita. Okay, namely, they were 4 colors, right? And then they were wound around. The 4 colors happened to be white, purple, scarlet, and sky blue. And each of them was wound, right, of 6 strands. So naturally, 4 times 6 is 24. La dina velo dayana. Okay, and therefore, we don't have a clear judgment, an absolutely clear picture, okay, of how these were done. Now, so it means we can't use the parochet as an example, okay, to determine the number of strands, okay, for those particular garments where it's not clearly cited. So we go on to another Braita. Choshen ve'ephod, okay, the breastplate and the ephod, esrim v'ashmona, they were made from 28 strands. Okay, again, some of the same colors, sky blue, purple, scarlet, white, but in addition, so that would have been right? 4 colors, if they were each 6, that would have meant 24. And what's the additional 4 colors from? That was a gold thread, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's see what happens. Minalan, how do we know that that's the case? Tichtiv v'asita choshen mishpat ma'aseh choshev k'ma'aseh ephod ta'asenu. Right? So here our pasuk says you make the breastplate, okay? That it's the work of skilled craftsmen, let's phrase it that way. And how should it be? K'ma'aseh ephod ta'asenu. All right, it should be made similar to the ephod, namely the following, right? Zahav, so it's going to have threads of gold. Tchelet, threads of sky blue. Va'argaman, threads of purple or crimson. V'tolad shani, and scarlet. V'shesh masar, and each of those are 6 fine twined, right? Arba'ah, the shita, okay? 4 of them, each with 6, right? That makes, we said 24. Esrin va'arba'ah, zahav arba'ah, another, right? Set of 4, okay? All right, and there are 4 colors. Ha esrin v'timnaya, that gives me 28. Okay. So the Gemara continues. Ve'ema zahav nami shisha. Maybe I would say that the gold also, the gold thread, should be 6, just like the other colors. Right? Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Amar Kra. However, he cites a pasuk. V'kitzeitz petilim, says the pasuk. Namely, that it tells us that when they used to beat the gold into thin plates, afterwards they would cut it into cords, and those then would be used to work and make the threads. Okay, patil, what does it mean, patil? Patilim. Okay, we have the word more than once. Harekan arba'ah. The fact that it said patilim means more than one. It's got to be 2. The fact that it's said twice means it's got to be 4. Okay, all right. Rav Ashi gives a different explanation. Amar Kra, he says the pasuk, la'asot betoch ha'tchelet ubetoch ha'argaman, to work it into the blue and into the purple. Hechi na'avid, how are they going to do this? What do we do? Na'avid arba'ah detrei trei. Okay, he suggests, what do? We make 4 gold threads, 2 strands apiece. Havu laho timnaya, that's going to give us 8. Ma'avid trei to trei. Okay, again, if we make 2 golds of 2 strands each, right? Utrei dechad, chad, okay, and 2 gold threads of 1 strand each, right? Maybe that would give us the amount. But the pasuk says, va'asita, you shall do, make. In other words, that's implying that they've got to all be equal. Shayu ko asiotav shavot. That's where we get the number of 28. Okay. Now, what happens? The Gemara goes on to another topic, right? We've been dealing with the garments, okay, of the Kohen Gadol, okay, and what about other aspects of those garments? Now, the Gemara tells us, Amar Rechava, Amar Rav Yehuda. Rechava, in the name of Rav Yehuda, says, Hamikareya bigdei kuhuna, one who tears the garments of the Kohen, okay, lokeh, is punished by Malchus, right? Shenamar, lo yikareya, because it says they should not be torn. Matkifla Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov challenges it by pointing out the following. V'dilma hachi ka'amar Rachmana. Maybe this is what the Torah had in mind. Na'avid le safa. Okay, let's make it so that there's a, I was going to say like not a hem on the garment, but a collar. Okay, a round kind of collar, right? Kihechi de lo nikrea, such that won't get torn. Okay? Mi kativ shalo yikareya, but is it really written that it should not be torn? Okay. Amar Rabbi Eli, right? Is this giving an explanation? Hameziach choshen me'al ha'efad. Okay. One who separates or detaches the breastplate from the ephod. V'hamesir badei aron, or one who removes the, let's call it the poles, okay, that were used for the aron. Lo keh. Here too, a person doing those things will get punished by Malchus. Shnei amar lo yizach, because it clearly says they should not be detached. V'lo yasuru, and that they should not be moved. Okay? Mad kifla Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Okay? So again, Rav Acha bar Yaakov raises a challenge. V'dilma ki ka'amar Rachmana. Perhaps when the Torah said it there, Chadkinhu va'avdinhu shapir. Okay, he's saying that perhaps they did it to make them chazak, chadkinu, to strengthen them, va'avdinu shapir, to make them better. In other words, to prevent them from being capable of tearing. Kadei shelo yizach v'lo yasuru, in order so that they can't be moved, that they can't be detached, things like that. Mi kativ shelo yizach v'shelo yasuru. But the Gemara says, but is it written clearly that they shouldn't be detached or shouldn't be removed? So the Gemara continued. Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Chanina Rami. He raised another point. Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Chanina, by pointing to a contradiction. K'tiv b'tabot ha'aron yiyu habadim lo yasuru mimenu. Namely, that the poles that go through the rings of the ark, it says that those should not be moved, right, or not be removed, really. Uktiv, and afterwards, v'huva et badav b'tabaot. But then afterwards, we have another pasuk that clearly says that, and they brought and put the poles into the rings. Haketzad. How is that possible? Mitparkin ve'ein nishmatin. Maybe it's possible that we can say that they could be removed, okay, but they're not totally dislocated, I'm going to say, from their position, right? That's the case. Tanya nami hachi. And we have a braita. B'tabot ha'aron yihiyu habadim, says the pasuk. The poles of the ark will be through the rings. Yechol lo yihiyu zazim mimkoman. It's possible that it means that they shouldn't ever be moved from their place. Talmud Loma, however, the pasuk also teaches v'huva et badav b'tabaot, that they brought or inserted the poles in the rings.
When they have to move it.
Right? So the Gemara then tells us, or the Braita really, I v'huva et badav, if we're saying that the pasuk says that they'll be putting in these poles into the rings, yechol yiyu nichnasin v'yotzin. That seems to imply that they could be put in and taken out. Talmud Loma, b'tabot ha'aron yihiyu abadim. But another pasuk clearly tells us that these poles should, I'm going to use the phrase, remain in the
greens.
haketzad mitparkin ve'ein nishmatin. We can therefore say that they could be moved in their rings, but they cannot be totally removed from the rings. Okay? They did not come out. Right, so let's go on now as we finish this particular Amud, and we see Amar Rav Chama Barebi Chanina. Mai dichtiv. Now we're talking about the ark itself. Atzei shitim umdim. Right? That it said that that it was made from a certain kind of wood, acacia wood, that was standing. Now, what does it mean, acacia wood standing? She'omdim derech gedilatan, Rabbi Chama, Rabbi Chanina, that it was fashioned in a manner that the wood was standing upright. Okay, in other words, the boards were standing upright as a cross, in other words, vertical as opposed to horizontal, the same way the tree grows. Right? Davar acher, another possible explanation, omdim, shema'amidin at tzipuyim, that the boards of wood were such that they helped hold up other parts, okay, of the Mishkan, right? Namely, that they supported the gold plating that was in the Aron. Okay, Talmud Lomar, okay, Shema Tomar, Avad Sivran, Vatel Sikuyan. Okay, lest we say the standing could tell us that we might argue that it by standing, we would not want people to think that their hopes are lost or that their chances are abandoned. In other words, Hashem is a symbol that Hashem stands and supports them. Talmud Lomar Omdim, therefore it's standing. She'omdim la'olam ula'olamim, that they're standing for ever and ever. Right? Okay, let's come back now to the garments as we see the following. Amar Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina, Mai dichtiv. What does it mean when it says et bigdei hasrad l'sharet b'kodesh? Okay, implying that this word srad means that these garments are braided, plaited, things like that, similar to other items, and they're to be worn when the Kohen is doing his service in the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash, etc. Okay, so we go on to the next Amud. Ilmale bigdei kuhuna lo nishtayer mison ehem sheYisrael sarid upalit. Namely, we can take a drash and say sarid also means that which remains, a remainder, and therefore, were it not for the garments of the Kohen Gadol, okay, and remember we have said elsewhere that various garments bring kapara, okay, so were it not for the use of these garments as a source of atonement, all right, it would be as if there would be hardly any one left of the Jewish people. Right. Now, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar, he says as follows: Devei Rabbi Shimon Tana, according to the Academy of Rabbi Shimon, they taught begadim shegordin otan kivriatan miklehen, that what do we mean by these garments are sarid, that they have remains, or that they're plaited, they're twined? Okay, the following, and there's a school of Rabbi Shimon, that these are garments that gordin otan, that in their formation, in their creation, they are in a sense woven, okay, on the loom. Umisardin mehen klum, and we don't leave anything left over from these garments. Maihi, what is this understand? How do we understand this? Reish Lakish Amar Elu Maaseh Machat. That's to tell us that they are woven totally and they're not sewn. They're not, don't have any use or place for a needle. Okay. Okay. And that use of the needle would only be done to, let's say, finish the work and not make the garment. Meitive. But we challenge this with the following example. Big Day Kahuna, Eino Sinotan Maaseh Machat, that the clothing of the Kohanim are not to be made by needlework. Ele Maaseh Oreg, but clearly they are woven. Shneamar Maaseh Oreg, as it says in Shmot, they are woven work, right? Amar Abaye. And so Abaye says, Lo nitzricha ela levet yad shelahem. No, he says that statement was only made in terms of the question of what I'm going to call the sleeves of the garment. Kidetanya, as taught elsewhere in a Braita, Beit Yad shel bigdei kuhuna ne'ereget b'fnei atzma v'nidbeket im habeged, that the sleeves were woven by themselves and then they were attached, okay, to the garment by sewing. Umagaat ad pisat hayad, okay, and the length of the sleeves was such that they would run to cover up to the palm. Okay, right. So Gemara then continues and raises the following point. Okay, since that seemed to clarify the discussion of the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, we're going to come back to a slight discussion we had on the Aron. Amar Rachava, Amar Rav Yehuda, says in the name, Shalosh Aronot Asa B'Tzalel. There were actually three components, parts of the ark that were built by B'Tzalel. Emtsai shel eitz tisha. There was a middle, I'm going to call it box for the moment, okay? And that was made out of wood, okay? And it was 9 handbreadths. Pnimi, the innermost box, shel zahav. That was made from gold, shmona, and that was 8 handbreadths. Chitzon, the outermost box, asara umashahu, and that was made, okay, also from gold, and that one was 10 plus handbreadths. So they were like one nested in another, nested in another. Vahatanya, says the Gemara. But don't we have a Braita that teaches as follows? Ached asar umashahu, that it said that the size of the outermost section of the Aron was 11 handbreadths plus a little bit. Lo kasha. That does not have to be problem. Why? Ha, keman de amar yesh ba'avyo tefach. Here we have an example, okay, where there is one sage who claims that the thickness, right, was basically a tefach, okay, a handbreadth. Aha, kiman damar ein ba'avyo tefach. And in another case, we have a sage that claims that the thickness was not a tefach. Umay mashu. And what do we mean by plus a little bit? Zer. We say that that is the, if you want to call it the crown, the piece around the top, okay, of the aron, right? So Rabbi Yochanan now says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shlosha Zerim Hin, that there were three crowns, Shel Mizbeach, one on the altar, V'shel Aron, one on the ark itself, V'shel Shulchan, and one on the table. Shel Mizbeach, regarding the one on the altar, Zacha Aharon Unatalo, okay, that Aaron, okay, merited that and took it, namely the kahuna, okay, who would do their service with regards to the Mizbeach. Shel Shulchan, regarding the table, Zacha David Unatalo, okay, that King David was the one who merited that. In other words, his authority, okay, and his descendants afterwards. Right. And what about the third? Shel Aaron Adayan Munachu. That crown of the ark is still, I'm going to use available. Okay? It's waiting there. Namely, Kol Harotzeh Likach. Whoever wants can come and take it. Because the crown of the Aaron is Torah learning. Yavo v'yikach, may he come and take it. Shema tomar pachutu, lest others say that it's less valuable. Talmud lomar bi melachim yimlochu. No, because why? The pasuk says in Proverbs in Mishlei, I'm going to translate it through me, okay, or by my means will others rule. Okay, in other words, through knowledge of Torah, they will rule. Now, let's go on with the next piece. Rabbi Yochanan Rami. Rabbi Yochanan raised a contradiction. We seem to be implying that the Aron, okay, symbolizes in some way Torah learning. So what happens? Ktiv Zar. It's written as if it says one word, Zar, meaning strange. The Krenan, Zer, but we read it as Zer, a crown. How do we explain that? Zacha, if one merits it, Ne'eset lo Zer. Okay, it becomes for him like a crown. Lo Zacha, if he doesn't merit it, Zara himenu, it becomes foreign, strange to him, and he forgets his studies. Rabbi Yochanan Rame, again Rabbi Yochanan raised a contradiction, once more for a drush. Kativ, it's written, Va'asita lecha aron eitz, that you shall make the aron of wood. Uktiv va'asu aron atzei shitim. On the one hand, it said, and you, va'asita, you will make a ark of wood. Elsewhere, it's written in the plural, va'asu aron atzei shitim, that you in the plural will make the wood, the ark of acacia wood. Mikan l'talmid chacham, shebnei iro mitzuyin la'asot lo malachto. From here we learn, he says, that for the sage, the people of the community should do their work for him. Okay? In other words, they should provide him with funds so that he doesn't have to work and can spend all his time in learning. Okay? So let's go on. Another aspect of the aron, right? Mibayit umichutz titzapenu. From inside and without, you shall cover it, right? Amar Rava, says Rava, kol tamid chacham she'ein tocho kibaro, any sage whose personal integrity, okay, is not like his outside characteristics. Eino Talmid Chacham is not a true Torah scholar. Mar Abaye, ve'itema Rabba Bar Ula, says Abaye, and some say it was Rabba Bar Ula, Nikra Nitav. He says such a person would be called loathsome, as it says in a pasuk, Shneamar, Af ki nitav v'ne'alach ish shoteh kamayim avla. That what then of the person that's loathsome and foul, one who drinks iniquity, okay, through water. Now, the water, of course, is going to symbolize what? Torah, right? So, in other words, he drinks in the Torah, but he continues not to follow its practice, and therefore he becomes loathsome. Amar Rabbi Yishmael bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi, Mai dichtiv. What does it mean when the pasuk says, Lama zeh mechir biyad ksil leknot chachma v'lev ayin? Why is there a price in the hand of a fool to buy wisdom when he has no heart? Oy lehem l'sonehen shel talmidei chachamim. Woe to them who are the haters of the scholars, right? She'oskin b'Torah ve'ein bahem yirat shamayim. Okay? In other words, that the scholars themselves who indulge in Torah study, but they don't have any true fear of Hashem. Machriz Rabbi Yanai, and Rabbi Yanai declared in this regard to this kind of a situation, Chaval al delet le darta, okay, pity, okay, the man, okay, who has no, in a sense, no courtyard, Vatara le darte aved, and instead he simply makes a gate for his courtyard. In other words, what is he doing? It's a false front, so to speak, right? That namely the study of Torah should lead us to Yiras Shamayim and not be any false activity. Amar laho Rava l'Rabbanan, and Rava says to the other rabbis, B'matuta minaychu lo tirtun tarte gehinam. Says to them, okay, B'matuta minaychu. Okay, I request, I beg of you, okay, lo tirtun tarte gehinam. Don't place yourself in such that you're going to inherit Gehenna twice. Right? Basically, the concept being that if you didn't study, what happens? But if you study and you don't apply that learning and knowledge to your fear of heaven, all the more so is that inappropriate. Okay? Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Mai dichtiv. What about when the pasuk says, "V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe," that this is the Torah, right? That was Moshe put before the Jewish people. Zacha, if he merits, ne'eset lo sam chayim. Okay, then learning Torah is a health enhancing potion, medication. Lo zacha, if he doesn't merit, na'aseh lo sam mita, then it can become a drug that can cause death. V'hainu da'amar Rava, And this is what Rava says when he says, "De uman la sama dechaya." Right? One who makes his uman, I'm going to use the word, who's in other words, livelihood. Okay, in other words, his efforts in learning. Okay, sama dechaya. It becomes a potion of life for him. De lo uman la. If he does not work on it, make it something worthwhile, sama demota. It becomes a potion that results in death.
It really puts the concept, though, of being skillful in studies in somebody else's thought rather than the individual. So how does the individual himself know whether or not he's doing it appropriately?
Say that again, Steve.
How does the individual know whether he's studying appropriately? Because it looks like it's a judgment from the outside, whether somebody is skillful in Torah or not.
Right, right. I think that's why in these cases we understand that these are homiletical statements. And as the implication is, Torah study should not simply be an academic activity, but it should influence your life and direct you to have more Yiras Shamayim and a greater commitment. Okay? Amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. He says, Rabbi Yonatan Rami, that Rabbi Yonatan raised a contradiction. Kativ Pekudei Hashem Yesharim Mesamche Lev. One pasuk tells us that the word of Hashem, commandments of Hashem are such, right, that they are straightforward and they make the heart happy. Uktiv, and elsewhere we have another pasuk, also from Tehillim, by the way, Imrei Hashem Trufa, that the words of Hashem help purify, refine a person. Again, Zacha Mesamachto, Lo Zacha Sorafto. Okay? That if he merits, in other words, it makes him joyful, happy. If he doesn't merit, then it purifies him. In other words, it's going to direct him else in other ways. Reish Lakish Amar Migufei Dekra Nafka. Okay? He says that it comes from the essence of the pasuk, right? Zacha Sorafto Lechayim. Right? So Reish Lakish is presenting it a slightly different way, that if he merits it, it's going to refine him. In other words, it will make him a better person. Lo zacha tzarafto lamita. Okay? And if he doesn't merit it, the end result is that joint retirement board. Okay, it doesn't. Right?
Good morning.
Okay. Next pasuk that's going to get attention. Yirat Hashem Torah Omeret La'ad, says the pasuk continuing. The fear of the Lord is pure and it stands forever. Amar Rabbi Chanina, he says, Zeh halomed Torah b'tahara. That tells us about one who studies Torah in purity. Maihi, what do we mean by that? Nosei isha v'achar kach lomed Torah. Okay, namely that it's the example of the young student, I'm going to say, that marries and then he is able to study Torah without other kinds of thoughts on his mind. Right? Or how about the following example? Edut Hashem, okay, ne'emana, that the testimony of Hashem is faithful. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, he says as follows, Ne'emana hi laha'id belom deha, namely that the Torah is faithful to those who study it. Okay, in other words, whereas we have another pasuk, Ma'aseh Rokein, Ma'aseh Choshev. Right? Another part of the pasukim tells us, coming back to the garments, right, away from the message about Torah study. On the one hand, it says it is a item that is the work of embroidery. Also, it's the work of intent, okay, of design. Amar Rabbi Elazar, sherokmim bimkom shechoshvim. Namely, that when they made certain utensils, aspects of the Mishkan, right? Let's say the curtains, for example, okay, that they would design the, let's call it, I don't want to call it a picture, but they would design a symbol on the curtain, okay, and then they would afterwards embroider it, okay? So they would embroider the places which had been designed, okay? Now, why is that significant? Says the following Braita. Tana Mishmei the Rabbi Nechemia. Okay? Rokain, when they embroidered it, Ma'aseh Machat. They utilized, of course, needlework. Afichach Partsuf Echad. As a result, then, you had it, the image, I'm going to say, only on one side of the curtain, one face. Choshev, when it was designed, Ma'aseh Oreg, if it was done, okay, in a embroidered work as opposed to needlework, the Fichach Shnei Partsufot. Therefore, there were two faces. In other words, it showed both on one side of the curtain and on the other side of the curtain. Okay? Right? Now, coming further then, another part from our Mishnah, Be'elu nishalin be'urin v'tumim. Okay? Remember, our Mishnah said that only certain individuals were, I'm going to say, entitled to basically ask shilas of the Urim v'tumim. Right? Now, ki ata Rav Dimi Amar. When Rav Dimi came, he explained the following. Begadim shekohen gadol mishamesh bahem. The garments that were worn by the Kohen Gadol, mashuach milchama mishamesh bahem. Okay? That he was teaching that those garments could also be utilized by the mashuach milchama, okay, which I'm going to loosely translate as the chief army chaplain, so to speak, okay? Namely, Shnei as it says, Ubigdei HaKodesh, Asher Aharon, Yihiyu Levanav Acharav, that the garments that were made for Aaron would be for his sons after him. Okay, what does that mean? Lami Sheba Bigdula Acharav. It implies to the one who is next in esteem, right? Next in greatness after him. Okay? So who would that be? Well, okay, it could be the individual who is Mashuach Milchama, right? The priest at the Kohen Gadol, okay, are one step below the Kohen Gadol, right? Now, we have a question raised about that. Meitiv Rav Ada bar Ahava, v'amrei la kadi, Rav Ada bar Ahava, or someone who is not clear, raised a challenge. Yechol Yehe Beno Shel Mashuach Milchama Meshamesh Tachtav. Is it really possible that the son of the Mashuach Milchama would serve after him? Kederech Shebeno Shel Kohen Gadol Meshamesh Tachtav. The same way that the son of a high priest could serve after him. We'll go on just a little bit. Talmud Lomar. However, the text tells us, Shivat Yamim Yilbasham HaKohen Tachtav Mibanav Asher Yavo El Ohel Moed. 7 days he will wear it. The one who serves in the place among his sons, who comes into the tent of meeting, namely Mi Shera'ui Lavo El Ohel Moed, one who is worthy of going into the Ohel Moed. Ve'im ita, okay? He says, and if that's so, mechazeh chazi, right? Then it seems fit for him to wear it. And then Rav Nachman tomorrow will
What does it
pick up.
mean? What does it mean when they say the priest anointed for war? I don't understand that language.
Okay, that's why I use the phrase the chief army chaplain. Okay, in other words, remember, according to the Torah, a Kohen is supposed to go to those that are going to go out to war, and he's going to say, whoever has married should go back. Whoever has built a house should go back. Right? He lists these criteria. Whoever is afraid should go back. Right? If these are all volunteers and they have certain other obligations, okay, or situations, they should, right? So that is the person that they're referring to. Okay,
Thank you.
that's why I sort of call them a chief army chaplain. All right, okay, because he would be the one who would supervise what would happen perhaps to the Aron, since according to some, the Aron was actually taken out when they went to war. Okay, so that would be the case that I would present. Right? So we'll pick up tomorrow, as I said, on 73a with Rav Nachman and see what else is discussed there. Okay, in terms of what I'm going to suggest is what other differences